Okay, so the purpose of this video is to show you how to figure out the rise and set times of the moon or the sun at certain times of the day. So here's the way we're going to set this up. Let's say that this represents the Earth. Now you're looking at the Earth from the North Pole, so you're looking at it from above, so that represents the North Pole. Now, for this example, we need the sun, so let's say that the sun's rays are coming in from this direction here. Okay? So that represents light coming from the sun. Now, what does that mean? That means if you're looking at a person who is standing on the Earth at that point, then that represents noontime for that person. So that is noon for that person. Now, the Earth rotates around in that direction. So as the Earth rotates right here, that's going to represent a time of sunset. And if you think about it, the light's coming from the right-hand side here. If we drew a line across the Earth, then what's back here, that's dark. So you're going from the light side to the dark side, that represents sunset. And then right here, this is the opposite of noon, so this is the middle of the night, so this is midnight. And then over here, as the person rotates around, this would represent sunrise. Okay, now those are times of day, noon, sunset, midnight, sunrise, so you can reference things to that. Now, going around the Earth is the moon. So let's draw the moon's orbit. I'm doing a terrible job of drawing circles, but let's say that that represents the orbit of the moon. Now, the moon can be in any one of several positions on here. Let's say the moon is over here. Now, just like the Earth, the moon is going to be half light and half dark. So if you're here on the Earth, regardless of what time of day it is, if you can see the moon when it's in that phase, what you see is the dark side. So you can't really make out any features on it because it's dark. That's called a new moon. And as the moon goes around through its phases, let's say that the moon orbits in that direction. When the moon gets about right here, again, remember, the light from the sun is coming from that direction. Half of the moon is going to be illuminated, half of it's going to be dark. But from your perspective here on Earth, when you look at it, now what do you see? You'll see mostly dark, but you'll see a tiny bit of light. So that's called a crescent phase. And because the illuminated part is getting bigger after it was new, that's called a waxing crescent. Okay, now as the moon moves around even farther, it's going to be in this position. And again, half of it is illuminated and half of it is dark. So, looks like that. From your perspective here on Earth, if you can see the moon at all in any time of day, if you happens to be able to see the moon, then you're going to see what, half illuminated and half dark. Remember, this is the North Pole, and you're kind of looking at it like this. You have to imagine yourself down in this plane looking at it. What are you going to see? Well, that's half light, half dark. You're only looking at half of the moon in the first place, but half of that half is illuminated, so that's called a quarter moon, and this is the first quarter. Okay, now as we go around even farther, the moon's going to end up in this position here, half illuminated, half dark. Remember, the direction of the sunlight's coming in like that. But from your perspective here, when you get down in this plane and you look at it, well, it's going to be mostly illuminated, but there's still going to be a little bit of darkness visible from your position on Earth. Okay, what's this called? Well, this is a gibbous phase. I think I spelled that correctly, gibbous. And still the illuminated side is growing in this part, so that represents a waxing gibbous. Okay, now the moon moves around in its orbit. It's at this position here. And once again, half is illuminated and half is dark. But from your perspective here on Earth, when you look at that, what are you seeing? You're seeing the entire face illuminated, so that represents a full moon. Now, as you continue that trend around, let's see, we draw the moon here, again, half illuminated, half dark. From the perspective here, all right, now you're seeing mostly illuminated, but a little bit of darkness is creeping back in, this time from the other side. This is a gibbous phase, but now the moon has already reached maximum illumination, and now the illumination is getting smaller, so this is called a waning gibbous. And let's say it moves over here, again, half illuminated, half dark. From Earth perspective, this again is another quarter phase, but this is the third quarter. Now you might say, well, what happened to the second quarter? Well, second quarter is half, so you're seeing half of the moon illuminated. Remember, you can only see half at a time. We call that a full moon, but it's really sort of a second quarter or half moon that we're seeing. All right, let's go back here to this last one. We've got half of it illuminated, half of it dark, rays coming from the right-hand side. But from your perspective here, if you look towards the moon, it's mostly dark and a little bit of the illuminated side. So this is another crescent, and it's a waning crescent. So those represent the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 phases of the moon that you need to know. You've got crescent, first quarter, waxing, gibbous, and full moon, and it's waxing all the time that it's on this side, and then it begins waning after the full moon. So waning gibbous, third quarter, waning crescent, back to the new moon, and that cycle continues. Okay, now let's imagine that you happen to be here on planet Earth and it's sunset. Let me get a sheet of paper here. If it's sunset, then your horizon, anything that's on this side right here, I'll cover up the part that's below the horizon, but anything that's on this side right here and you're at sunset will be in your sky. So right on the meridian is going to be first quarter moon. So if the moon were in the first quarter phase, what would you see? It should be directly overhead or on your meridian, maybe not directly overhead, but on the overhead meridian. It should be right there. Well, where's the sun? Remember, the sun is off to the right. This is sunset, and the Earth, once again, is spinning in that direction. So the sun is getting lower and lower, and we'll go around like that. So now we're part way between sunset and midnight, and now anything that's over here would be visible. So let's say the moon happens to be in full phase. Well, if it's in full phase, then it should be above the horizon sometime between sunset and midnight. Let's go back to sunset for just a second. Well, where is the full moon at sunset? If the moon happens to be full and it's sunset, the moon is going to be right here on your horizon. Now, which horizon would this be? This would be your eastern horizon, and this would be your western horizon, because as the Earth spins, the sun's going down in the west, full moon coming up in the east. Now, you could go to this position right here, and what time of day is it in this position? Well, it's that time of day right there, which is midnight. So a good question might be, suppose that the moon is in the waxing gibbous phase, and it's midnight. Is the moon above the horizon? And the answer is yes, it's right there. And it would also be true if it were a waning gibbous phase or a full phase. Well, here might be another question. Is the first quarter moon visible at midnight? Well, if it is, it's right on the western horizon because it's setting. What about the third quarter? Well, the third quarter is on the horizon. If I'd have drawn this a little more carefully with a perfect circle, you'd be able to see that better. But the third quarter moon is going to be over here, and it's rising on the eastern horizon. Okay, so let's say it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, how do I show that? 3 o'clock in the afternoon is about sometime halfway between noon and sunset. So I'm going to put it right there. Okay, 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the new moon above the horizon. Now you may not be able to see it because it is dark. Excuse me, the dark side is what's facing Earth, but the correct answer is, yeah, it's above the horizon right there. But if it were in waxing crescent fade, it would also be above the horizon. And if it was first quarter, it would also be above the horizon. And if it were a waxing gibbous, it would be right on the eastern horizon, so just rising. And the waning crescent, if it were in that phase, it would be setting. Okay, so let's say the question becomes, well, what time does the third quarter moon set? Okay, let's take this and go all the way around. Where's the third quarter moon? Carrying it all the way around. Third quarter moon is right here. Now we see that the third quarter moon is rising when the time is midnight. Remember that arrow is pointing towards the time. So what time does it set? Well, it's going to set over here on the western horizon, so let's bring it on around. That time of day right there is sunrise. Bring it on around. That's probably about, 9 o'clock in the morning. Bring it on around. Okay, look at this. At noon, the third quarter moon is setting over here on the western horizon. So if the question were, what time of day does the third quarter moon set? The answer would be, what? Noon. Noon is the time. Okay. What time of day does the new moon rise? Well, we can continue on around. It's going to look like this. The new moon is on the eastern horizon right at sunrise. There you go. So you got it. What time does the full moon rise? Full moon rises at sunset, which kind of makes sense because you expect the full moon to be on the opposite side of the earth from the sun. Okay? So that's the way you figure out what time of day the moon will rise and set at when it's in different phases. So take that and study it for a little bit and try and ask yourself a few questions and figure it out yourself. So there it is.